Not too careful otherwise.
And we are live as of 4 seconds ago. Awesome. Okay, so episode 16, I have Eric Nielsen of New Scale Herpetoculture. And I was just explaining to you, like I do most folks, that there isn't really a ton of structure for this podcast. I just kind of want to talk to people that keep stuff that I think is cool and I want other people to learn about. And when you go through your social media, if you scroll back far enough, there are quite a few things, crested geckos and things that would be considered quote unquote common. But a lot of the stuff that you have and have a great deal of success with now are a little more obscure. And I like some of your posts because you posted that you have a low key collection. And I put that in the descriptor in quotes, like that you described your own collection as low key. Uh, and when I read some of your posts, it seemed like maybe because it was a smaller collection than you had in the past. But the collection that you have are really cool species, and then all the pictures you post are things that are seem to be more in-depth setups. And you actually in that the one post said something about they're not just paper toweled art, which I thought was really cool. And then to go back and see your different species and things and how you have them set up, it does look like a lot more naturalistic enclosures. And then you still continue to have success with things, as I see eggs posted and babies and a continuation there. So yeah, just kind of take us through what all you're keeping and what it looks like.
So yeah, I mean, I guess the main reason I self-deprecate is that I don't know, like I do have a small collection that like doubled because of this Ebonavia import batch. But until like a month ago, I only had like 20 some animals. Like it was down at one point, it was like over 100, but I don't know. I've come to find that that's not manageable for my lifestyle to like actually give them enough, um, enough attention to do them justice. But so right now I have geckos, lizards, and a few ball pythons.
Okay.
Still got some foster children I've gained along the way that way. But geckos, I got the Ebonavia. Got a couple retiree crested geckos, a really grumpy Chihuahua that I refer to as the Tokay. Um, got a lot of. I have been like cutting things further down. The intent before the Ebonavia thing was to actually like continue to trim down some for several reasons, but
Okay.
so I have like two male Goniurosaurus hainanensis. I have like a
Very cool.
male Paradera iberiensis, but like I don't really like. I'm not currently breeding a lot of species, I guess, but I
Right.
have a decent number of each, I guess. And then for the lizards, I've got 4 Platysaurus imperator, just the offspring from some animals that I sent down to Ari Flagel in the spring. So I didn't keep them for a while, and then I kept them again once they hatched, which was kind of goofy. Um, I have a smaller species of Platysaurus that I've tried to find a key that's functional for them. I spent like $75 on like 3 different papers to like try to figure out, and I ended up just like putting air quotes around them and calling them punguensis because that's what I found an example of that was closest, but it was not nearly verifiable for sure. Then I've got Cordylus trapetosternum, which are like used to be like the poor man's Cordylus. I mean, they kind of still are, probably relatively speaking, but like
Right.
I I paid like $45 for the trio that I have had for like 6 years now. Like they're
That's
you
awesome.
know they definitely stopped coming in for $15 a piece. But
Oh yeah.
for a while, there were just bins full. Um, yeah, I've tended to be heavy on the geckos. The last, like 5 or 6 years, I started keeping those like cordylid species. I've kept Cordylus berardiucii, which are like, they came in with the Tripetosternum, so they were both kind of the brown spiky imports for $15, and then they're more flattened and have like a more like triangle face, but they don't breed as well historically, I guess. Um, so I ended up, I had one just captive born, but it was like 2 months in, so like she had it already
Right.
In her when I got her. I mean, no, I captive bred them,
Yeah.
but
I mean, you did. It was born in your care.
there you go. Selective phrasing. um, yeah, I don't know. I've just kind of like, at one point I started branching out more and just kind of didn't stop branching out too much. But
So you posted. I've seen you say a couple of times about your obscure little brown lizards. Uh, what what brought you to cordylids? Like why did you find interest in those?
um, I think they were honestly like there was just that period. I mean, I've thought they were cool for a long time, but like, you see a lot of like the smog giganteus or the flame bellied, the Mosambicus,
Mm-hmm.
or Ouroboros cataphractus, the armadillo lizards, are like, the ones you see people posting who aren't reptile people or whatever.
Right.
But so those $15 to $20 poor man's version for somebody who was bored enough to want to branch out a little bit at the time was a pretty unique opportunity.
Yeah, for sure.
Didn't necessarily realize it at the time because those bins were just you go to like Tinley or something and it was just like one vendor would have like 30 of them.
Yep.
Which is kind of sad now, like a lot of species. But anyways,
I get it. I went in with some friends and got a pleuris, which are little obscure brown, black and white iguanids from Madagascar that nobody cares about. And it was the exact same way where I think they're cool and I wanted to see more people have lizards that were kind of like a bearded dragon but different, and they were super cheap, so I wanted to try them. Yeah, I mean it's kind of the same boat of I obscurely had a nerd moment where I thought they were cool, so I picked them up, and now I'm just that dude that has them. Like I don't know that it. Those species kind of seem to go that way of, the flame bellies and the giganteus, and people post all those pictures and like, oh, these are really cool, and it's like, well, flame bellies, I get, they're a neat color, but like the people that post those things, it's one of those like, well, are you saying it's cool because the lizard's like $4,500, or is it a cool lizard to keep? Like I don't know. I mean, I've
that's
obviously never kept a crazy expensive lizard, but like your way to me kind of makes more sense of if you kept a couple of species in that group of lizard that you were able to afford, and it turns out they're cool, then awesome. So maybe down the road you roll your pennies and you get the expensive version because you now know that species is cool. Like it scares the crap out of me that I'm gonna, I could get this cool expensive species, and then you get it and it turns out it's super lame. It's just really expensive, and it's like I just wasted so much money.
I'm not. I'm not even gonna name names species wise because I do have respect for them. Like I don't know if there's a gecko species I've kept where I was like, this sucks. But there's definitely some of the most popular and most expensive reptile species end up being like relatively speaking, kind of disappointing. Just like boring behaviorally, etc. And I think
Right.
there are a lot of species that get overlooked because they are, they're different colors, but they get generalized as the brown lizards.
Yep.
And I don't know. Yeah, I've a lot of the stuff that I've kept has resulted from me initially like trying to get my feet wet with something, and then I end up just like not getting that species that I was going for, and they're just, I think, like Paradura. For a while, I had 5 or 6 species at one time, none of which were the Masobi. Um, that I or the Gracilis. Those were kind of the two I was eyeing up. Just kind of
Sure.
wanted to like, because they're notoriously just touchier than a lot of the. Somebody once referred to them as the spiky brown Paradura and the smoother, colorful Paradura.
Yep.
And I just never did. But same with like the Cordalis. I wasn't necessarily like, if this works out, then like next year I'm getting armadillo lizards, But it was
Right.
like, I would definitely much rather try something else. Not that their lives are less significant than the other, but at the end of the day, it's like, I'm not dropping like $3,500 or whatever
Right.
just to see if I have luck in that realm, I guess.
Yeah, my wife is my kind of compass for that sort of stuff because I've kept for a really long time, and so I've kept all sorts of different things, and then I do find myself like, oh well, I've kept these and they're cool and I'm pretty good at it, and then I would like to try this other thing, and that other thing is inevitably always expensive or rare, or there's a reason I haven't had it yet. And we do educational shows, and she's always like, well, you know it why is it important to you? And I'm like, oh well, it's a weird subspecies, or it's some where it's from, it's a different color, whatever the difference is. And her big thing is like, okay, well, do you have species that are like that? Like, yeah. Do they have similar behaviors, and do you teach similar things with them? And I'm like, yeah. And she goes, well, then you're just spending a bunch of money for something that you think is cool. And I was like, yes, that's what I want to do. And it's like, well, but that's not what I use it for, And oh yeah, these cool arboreal, whatever characteristics I'm gonna teach a lesson on for these kids. And it's like, well, I could really use a green animal for that. I don't have to use a chameleon, but I really want to. And it's,
Say you can be both sides. Like I said, like there's some species that whatever I could be kind of underwhelmed with, but it's like, hey, would you like one? Yes, yes.
right.
Do you have
Yeah,
another? Do you have a mate? Like a do you have a female for this male? But
yeah, for sure.
not naming names again.
No, and it's when I talk the people that I've talked to so far that do keep more of the obscure stuff, that seems to be kind of the way it goes, is that folks have an interest in those certain obscure sets, when you start to get into different geckos and things like that. And it is kind of a barrier for some people of, like, I think I would like Parawadura, or I think I would like, these kind of animals. And it's like, well, if I've never kept them, me personally, like, I'm going to start out with the quote unquote beginner, more entry level price point animals to see if I enjoy that genus or if I enjoy that group. I don't want to drop the crazy money and then it turns out that it's either not my thing, or if it is really negative and it doesn't fit my building, or they struggle to, do well where I'm at and things like that. Like, it's, yeah, man, that's kind of hard when your interests lie in things that are more off the beaten path.
I have I've never touched Europlatus. A lot of my friends have Europlatus, and it makes me sad and jealous. But I don't know. I almost got some Henkelei to like get my feet wet with the go-to, leaf tail gecko, but it was like a trade that fell through eventually. But even then, I don't know. I remember like, I don't know, 15 years ago or whatever, when they were just like on price lists for like, you can get wild caught ones, but like everyone would just be like, yeah, they don't do well.
Right.
And and then you see people who are just like, for a good reason, are like, these things are epic. And I was
Yeah.
like, I've just never, I don't know, never felt, I respect them too much. I've never felt that I like deserve the right to keep Europlatus. I don't know.
So
I think I could do fine with them, but some of
see,
them.
I have one friend that she has been very successful with Europlatus, but she works in IT and she works from home, and so her care for them is very, very involved, and she doesn't really automate very much of her stuff. She's much more hands on. Um, and for me, it was always one of those things of like hearing her describe it. I was like, oh man, that's so awesome. And then I sat and thought, and I was like, I don't know if I could do that. I would have to automate it, and like, just because of the way I keep my collection, I was like, dude, I don't think I could do what you do. And people
Well,
that
it's
are
like,
successful with them are always like, oh no, it's no big deal. It's because it's been so good for them that I'm like, but if I mess it up, like there's such a big deal,
well, it's like, if I were to do it, I would want to make sure I was gonna do it. Like,
Right.
I don't want to dink around with them. And I just don't know if like I would want to like focus my attention on them too much for what I could actually accommodate.
Yeah. And I do think that like quite a few of the folks that I've talked to so far, I've had a few people that had collections that were a little more variable, but a lot of folks really do focus down hard. And like when I talked to Michael, and it was like, oh, Eurymastix is his jam, and it's like, well, yeah, then he's so hardcore desert setup, like he probably would struggle to do things from different places, even if he thought they were cool. And that definitely seems like one of those species where it's like, these are the kind of things I keep. This is how all my setups are, and you don't really stray very much from it because the parameters are kind of stuck that way. And that, for me, that would be really difficult because I have a ridiculous variety of stuff. But yeah, it's always kind of made me hesitant for a lot of those species where the people that I see have success seem to be the people that is what they do. And then they have like one or two other random things they think are cool. And yeah. So tell me about the cover picture for your Facebook thing with the mouth full of mouth.
Oh yeah. So I pretty much never bug most of my stuff unless like I need to. I don't know. They don't like it. Like, I don't know. I can hold off. But I was kidding. I had 2 litters of the Crodiolus trapetosternum last spring. And they're like already like 80 to 90% grown. They grew crazy, suspiciously fast. But
Wow.
I was trying to get all of them out. There's an accompanying picture either like that same time or in the same time frame ish, of like all 5 of them in my hand.
Yeah.
And I was taking some other pictures while I had them out, because once I put them back, it's like, I'll see you. I'll maybe touch you next month. I don't know.
Right.
But yeah, 2 of them just decided they really didn't like me, but they were like, hey, I don't like Eric either. Let's both bite him, but not bite him. And we'll just like bite each other. And then they lockjawed like that. And I was like, okay, I'm going to be an adult about this after I get a really quick picture because this is hilarious. And then, I started like spraying their mouths, which eventually works. But
And
they really don't bite much. They're not biters either.
Was there any fallout to that? I mean, are they both pretty well okay? Nothing.
Oh yeah, there was no like. I mean, I'm sure they had like teeth marks or something, but like you couldn't like. There wasn't like an outline super visible or anything. I mean, there was nothing. They didn't like thrash each other or anything. I mean, they literally just like closed down on each other, and then I sprayed them and they opened up. But yeah, cordylids in my limited experience like just don't bite that much. One of the adults bit me once, and no platysaurus has ever so much as threatened to bite me.
Really?
Yeah, they're spastic and nervous and freak out and run away, but they aren't feisty that way. But cordylids, if you tick them off enough, they'll try to. But in general, that whole group is surprisingly mellow that way.
Very cool. And you have the distinction of being the person who, in the chat, Clint Reinhardt insulted all of Lace Monitors. So that was good. They are a high-priced monochromatic water monitor. Well done, Clint. I'm sure you made lots of friends with that comment. I get it. I've actually given people a hard time about that before. I think it's kind of funny. But
I think the wild type and the Bell's phase are both really cool. I've seen a lot of Bell's phase over time, and also they're kind of one of those where it's like, hey, how are all these lace monitors getting here? You know, I don't see a lot of people posting clutches hatching.
Yeah, I do wonder that. I do know of a few people that have been successful with them. So here's one of my thing. That was back when you were talking about cost versus fun to keep. Yeah, I know, Clint. I just had to give you a hard time because I was hoping there'd be a monitor nerd somewhere in the chat that would just flame you, but that's okay. Now, species like that, you do get the, we can't get anymore, legally get anymore. And so, you get the price factor there. But then I've spoken with people that breed stuff like that and are super successf을 and are like, oh yeah, it's no big deal. It's like, well, where are they? Like, how come they never, because I've seen at least 2 people have tons of success. And then, there's like 4 babies on Instagram. It's like, if I would think that more people would show off stuff like that if they had received it. I don't know. That's just a weird thing for an $8,000 lizard. It drives me nuts.
If I got lace monitor eggs, there would be like 10 posts a week from me just like, check out these lace monitor eggs.
Yeah, I'd be that idiot just sitting in front of the incubator with my phone. Like, I'll just live stream it on Facebook. You guys can watch them sweat in this box. Speaking of rando lizards that have pretty cool colors, you had those Emperor flat rocks, and then I followed you with those for a little bit, and then you had moved that group on. But dude, that was super cool. You were one of the first people I'd ever seen that had like a nice group. They were all healthy, nicely cut. Like, they looked like
they polish up good.
Yeah, but they looked like
they're
a healthy
gross
group of
when
pet
they
lizards.
come in.
Yeah, you're just so used to seeing the train wreck of those when they come in, and then I saw all your posts, and they look brand new and shiny, and and you seem to have a ton of success with them. Like, did you did you only get that group, or had you gone through some to get to the point where you had nice healthy ones, or how did you deal with that?
I had great luck, like survivorship wise. Like I got a pair to start with, then grabbed another female shortly after once I realized that they were really cool, and had for a couple months been transitioning well. And then eventually I got a second trio. So I had 2.4 at one point in separate groups. Wasn't having great luck. Felt like I should probably diversify who had them in their hands, because I didn't. I don't know. There's a balance between like sticking it out to like persevere with a project, and just acknowledging like maybe this is one that I'm not, I'm not the one, like somebody else. Anyways, I got rid of a trio.
That is a rare point of view. I think that's impressive. Anyway.
Well, it was like, I don't know. I don't produce as much stuff, like, as I feel like somehow the overall vibe is, or whatever. Like I feel like I sometimes am considered to have like more of a resume than I do, but I've kept a lot of stuff. But there's a lot of species where it's like, hey, it's been 3 years. I had Haemophilus fasciata for like 3 years and hadn't even gotten infertile eggs. Like had nothing. Just they did nothing. And then my friend David Kelly was just pumping them out like crazy. And sometimes you just get that recipe where it's like, for whatever reason, here this way they work. So I sent him my trio, and Clint has some of those, if not all of them now. And like, dude, I don't know. It would be awesome to have like, wow, it's been 5 years now and I finally produced them, but I knew that like they were imports. I don't know how old they are. They've already been in my care for 3 years. Like, I know somebody I
You don't want
trust
to run
who
out of
is.
time.
Yeah, I know somebody I trust who's pumping them out. Like whatever it is, between their knowledge and experience, and just sometimes it's like where you live. Like you'll get animals
sure.
that pump out for somebody else, you send them, and then they don't. But
See, man, but I think that having seen the things that you posted in your collection and stuff, that I think, and like I was telling you before we got started, other than the people I personally know, the people that I interview on this show have been recommended to me by my friends, or people that I follow on social media, tell me who they think are doing well and that I should talk to. And I think that, well, for one, most of your posts are very self-deprecating, so that's a trait that you have. But I think that people regard what you're doing because it's not necessarily just production, because the people who are in the corners of the hobby that do keep the more obscure stuff, and who are successful with things that are imported and are, quote unquote cheap, but then it takes work to do well with them. They value people like you, who you kept those for 3 years, like, and didn't produce, which is what you had wanted to do, but you did successfully keep them for a fair
they
period
look
of time.
great. I'm really good at keeping animals alive.
Right, but that's
it's
when
the
you
whole
talk
like
about,
having them do the
but when you talk about some of these species, for nerds like us, who I've never kept 3/4 of the things that you're talking about, and then I see that you're keeping them and they're in cool enclosures and they look great. And like, seriously, when I saw the emperors, like, it looked like you took imports and like hurried up and washed them off and then took how they take the picture to sell them after they got out of the water. But you didn't. Yours just always looked like that. And I just thought that was super cool. And I don't know, I think people put a lot of value on that, and then kind of like the cool hobby puts a lot of value on also producing that. And I don't know, I just think they're like two separate things. And I know for sure that a lot of people regard the fact that you keep a lot of those cool things and keep them well, like that's really important to a lot of people. So I don't know. It I don't want you to think that you don't have a cool resume, and maybe that you want more on your resume, but like a lot of people that have told me about you definitely think that your resume is cool. So that's a kudos to you.
I'm flattered. No, I don't know. Like if I was putting it down on a resume where it's like, hey, look at this piece of paper. Don't look at this. Look at the piece of paper like that
Okay.
I gave you with my list. I feel like, yeah, that's pretty cool. But like, I feel like, I don't know. I'm friends with too many people on Facebook who are like, hey, look at the 6 different species I hatched out this week. And like, oh, this is one of 30 that I produced of this year. And it's like,
Yeah, I have a lot of that.
that's more animals than I produced last year total.
Right. Well, I mean, I don't produce anything except morning geckos, and I think that's cheating. So
That's not cheating, because I don't remember who it was that said this, but it's true of me too. I don't know what it was. Morning geckos did awful for like they did fine. They looked great. They just didn't do much.
see,
I
man,
dabbled around a little bit, but
when did you ever tear apart the enclosure? Like, did you move them out or whatever?
yeah, they're gone. At no point did I find. I think I might have had some like pretty clearly infertile ones, but I don't know if I didn't give them that much time though.
So
I'll admit.
I didn't see babies. I saw a couple of babies, and I was like, okay, cool. And I didn't see babies for, man, like 8 or 10 months. And then maybe like 6 months ago, I started finding babies again. But my group were eating them, and they were laying eggs in a place where I couldn't find the eggs. And so I just assumed I was never getting any. And then I did some changing with plants and stuff, and I moved this fake piece that was in there, and I had no idea they could get behind it. And it was just like a scene from the movie Aliens of like all the eggs that were back there, and they had all clearly hatched. And I was like, did I lose 40 baby gecko? Like, where are all of these geckos? Oh my God, are they in my facility? And then maybe like a month after I found that crazy cluster of eggs, I saw one eat a baby on the front door of the enclosure. And I was like, oh, that's why they're all fat and do really well. They're eating the babies. Great.
That's not what I meant by some of you can be feeders.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but yeah, so I mean,
infanticide is frowned upon in like most situations. It seems like that's a real no to a lot of people. Deal breaker.
I was so mad. When I found the eggs, I was upset because I thought I was like, they're parthenogenic. Like, I cannot suck this much. Like, what is going on? And then I find all these eggs, and then I really freaked out because I thought my enclosure, like, oh, they got to be getting out somewhere, and I had a whole separate freak out. And then I started sealing things, and in the midst of sealing things, I saw that idiot eat that baby, and I was like, oh, I'm a separate kind of moron and didn't know that happened. Crap.
It's understandable, though.
Makes sense why I have babies. Yes, Mike, if you have babies with regrown tails, that is why. Their mothers are chasing them.
Unless you were talking to somebody that said they just have like no problem communally housing and they just leave them. And
yeah, I've had several folks tell me that, and it seems to be a lot of folks that use the film canisters for eggs, and I don't do that. I don't really know why that would make a big difference, but I know that the folks who talk to me about keeping things great communally also do that. So I don't know. I just, it's a very obscure thing. Anyway, back to what we were talking about for your stuff. Sorry, that was a huge tangent.
That is my stuff too, because like you
Well,
said, it was like
true.
a real awkward moment of like, why am I not able to? It was humbling, we'll say.
Um, with the flat rocks, what I mean, I think they're cool and they have really cool colors. But what drew you to those? Why did you seem to have picked things that are when you talk about the girdles, they're a little more plain, imported. So
They get really pretty too, though.
Oh yeah.
Over time, they come in looking like mud, but
But so now is that? Did you know that when you got them, or
no,
did you realize that as you kept them over time?
I mean, that first like week or two of like bunch of food, getting hydrated, and like rinsing them off.
Right.
They do color up, but I mean over time they just kind of more gradually continue to. The Platysaurus, it was kind of just I don't know if I heard it referenced or if it was just kind of like the theory, because they're like in a social structure in the wild that usually includes like several males
Yeah, it's
with like
cool.
a dominant male who's the most colorful generally. I assume most of the time, all the time. And then like the more lesser males kind of approach looking like females with a little bit of color. And then females for like all Platysaurus are some degree of just like black or gray with like three stripes that are either yellow or white depending on the species. But
Yeah.
I basically was just like, these imports don't look that great, but if a male all of a sudden has his own like harem, I wonder if they'll kind of clean up. Because if I don't know, did you see any of the pictures of them? Like I took a picture of the pair I had on their first day. And
Yep.
like that male doesn't even look like the same animal.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
like
Dude, by the
bland,
end,
rusty red.
it was amazing. Yeah.
It was nuts, and like a lot of it was just like time and food.
For sure.
Just,
Now, is there when you get stuff like that where you're getting import stuff, um, is there any kind of specific treatment you did for that kind of stuff, or was it just hydration and good food, or did you medicate or anything like that?
I didn't end up with the platies. They didn't come in with any mites, and mostly one of the main things I think that I had to do for the Platysaurus was just like suck up to them as much as I could. They're extremely flighty, and they stress out really easily, and like they look great, which is kind of where I learned the lesson after all these years of like an animal can be adequate weight, good colors, no outward signs of illness, whatever, and also not be having a good time.
Right.
That like I don't know. In most captive conditions, I don't think that they can like feel secure enough to have a good quality of life. They're just so flighty. I mean, I ended up using just big solid walled black enclosures which basically had cutouts for the lamps, but everything else was like, hey, I'm just gonna like not have you see any stuff outside, because I tried hilariously like early on I tried aquaria, like I just had like a 40 breeder for the pair, and it was like very quickly it was like I'm gonna go get something that's solid, because they are just shy. You just don't see them. I
Wow.
would oftentimes go down the stairs, turn the corner to where I would be like in view or, able to be heard, and just hear them just thump, 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 like as they disappeared. A lot of the like video footage or whatever that I got of them was just like setting my phone up trail cam style. So I just like
Really?
set it and like either like prop it just right or like tape it and just leave for an hour and come back and look over the tape to see what my animals were doing.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't know. So that's a big component as to why they are in Texas in a, I don't know, I don't remember what I said it was, but a huge display enclosure, and it like they came out of their shells a lot more,
Yeah.
and that was kind of what I was hoping for. So it worked out because I was like, for them to be going into like a display cage, I was like, oh no, will that cause problems by being more
For sure.
exposed? But it gives them a lot of space, and I think for them, most of their time, at least what my brain has interpreted from the resources, would be that a lot of their time is spent basically on rock flats, not flat, yeah. Um, basically where they've got this like broad surface, where they've got some like crevice stuff to like choose from if they really need to book it. But a lot of it is just that they're fast as, oh yeah, my nephew's F word. And I think they've evolved too much to be able to just see for a distance. And like, that's where they keep calm. Like if they can survey the distance and see that nothing's an immediate presence, that's,
Right.
they at least need to know that they can like book it. And I think that's where like the setup that they're in now, that's just huge,
Yeah.
gives them that situation where, like, with all due respect to my own standards, I was not keeping them in an 8x8x7 or whatever it is.
Sure. Yeah. I
I
mean,
think it was generous, but it definitely wasn't that. So,
right. Now, with the other species, do you notice a similar style of just wanting to jet, or are they a little more calm, or have you seen any differences there, or is it kind of the same idea where they just run from the albino monkey outside their enclosure?
So I have the Punguensis, which are a lot smaller because the Imperator are like a 8 to 10 month old beardy. I don't know. Depends on
Yeah.
how fast your beardies grow, but they're like 7 inches SVL, about double that total, maybe a little more with the tail.
Really?
And
I don't think I
then
realized they were that big. Okay.
the Punguensis though are probably maybe 4 inches SVL.
Oh,
So it's
okay.
like they're, and most Platysaurus are. Imperator are kind of just this one random giant in the genus. No, there's nothing that's anywhere close. Like there's a little bit of a range between the small and the smallish medium, and
Okay.
then there's just like Imperator that
Oh,
could be like the arc that all the other species fit on
okay.
somehow. Yeah, they're that. But the funny part is that the quote unquote Punguensis, the other species that's smaller, are a lot bolder, and I've tended to get that impression from like other people with other species like Intermedius or
Really?
stuff like that. That I don't know what it is, but they're just like cockier. I don't know, like they're more willing to be out and about. But I also wonder if some of that doesn't have to do with the fact that like being that small, you're able to keep them in, because I had those in pretty decent sized enclosures, even though they're little, because they're really active and stuff. So I think it might have been that, like, in a way it was closer to that, like, proportion where they had like extra
Like relative to their size, you were
Yeah.
doing the same idea. Okay.
Yeah.
I get that. Okay. On that vein with enclosures, I've seen some of your pictures for enclosures and even just of your animals as they are in their enclosures. You have some pretty cool stuff, and it just reading some of your posts seems to be pretty important to you. And so, like, what kind of colored that for you? That you, I mean, obviously, it probably makes a difference because you keep several species of lizards that enjoy the rocky outcrops and have some pretty specific environmental standards.
And I live on a property that has about half an inch of soil and about 2 feet of granite underneath that regularly spits up. So I have kind of a wonderful selection of rocks. So that makes that easy. I don't know if I would be as quick to do so if that wasn't available, but I don't know. I think early on with, like, kind of bred, almost exclusively crested geckos way back, I didn't have like paper towel and like pipe insulation, as their setups or anything, but like I think I had like actual like PVC tubes, and like just like a fake bushy bigger plant, and then like mulch substrate. It was pretty plain, and I guess I don't know, it a lot of it probably came from just thinking it looked cooler like to have other reasons too, but just thinking that I don't know, I've kind of gravitated towards just a general movement towards trying to hook them up with stuff that they'll actually like. Like if they'll egg checks can suck a little more if it means that like this thing can live somewhere that's kind of annoying to rip up if I have to look for eggs.
For sure.
If I'm gonna be as unproductive as I like to talk smack about myself with, then like at least in between egg checks that I find out there's no eggs, like I should at least give them something decent to work with. And I tried to go like really fancy. I think I went from like less fancy than I wanted to be to like trying to go all the way up to like vivarium level, like living soil, like the whole thing. And some of my cages kind of are, but I call them planted tanks because I don't do a Clint Reinhardt level of biodiversity in my cages. A lot of them are basically just planted tanks, but depending on what it is, that can be helpful. And then some stuff is like the Ebonavia, I've got like a dozen enclosures for right now because I've just got kind of an awkward number of them recently. But it's much more artificial. Like there's cork and stuff, and kind of a soil sand peat mix substrate, but like there's fake plants in each of them. I don't know. They're, for practicality's sake, I don't want to be ripping up plants to try to find eggs that are
sure
tiny.
So speaking of those, what pushed you to go that way, and do the group and have kind of a little bit larger numbers there?
So I just have to point out Clint's message. about that he said don't use the B word, which I believe his phrasing was accurate for me, which is that I'm a pretentious non-B word user. Um, it's fine. It's just like for the same reason I don't like people that say Italian or guesstimate. You know, it's just like you can use it. I don't care, but I'm gonna be salty about it a little bit. Um, Evanavia. So I've had them for like 7 years, and just had pretty poor luck with them. But they're super cool. I saw them like I don't know 10 or 12 years ago or something on some Euro page, and it was just like one of those like, oh wow, okay, I need to like keep those someday. I'm sure they're like $500, and somewhere off in the distance where, and then Madagascar was like, hey yo, I got some. They're like $20.
Yep.
I was like, oh, we're doing that, huh? And then so I had a small group going for quite a while, and then I had just earlier this year started. Well, I hatched one. Um, right around when all these imports were coming in, and it was like I've seen them come and go every few years,
Right.
with the imports, you know,
Yep.
and it was like it'd just be really dumb. A lot of the Madagascar stuff, but a lot of species in general, it's like it'd be really dumb if these were like just here for like super accessible, and like 2 years from now, like what if we find out that they're just like Madagascar's closed? Like that was
Yep.
it. Good job. Thank you for taking them for granted.
Yep.
So I kind of decided to just like not, I mean impulsively, but working with kind of got my feet wet. I knew I was at least producing them finally.
Yeah.
Um, Basically, I've just been hoarding them. Well, my idea is Clint may or may not be in on it. I'm not sure. I haven't decided yet. He is. Um, Basically, just like when you order like 5 Ebonavia from some import reseller, you're like this shipment, like this year's imports have had like 3 different species because they got reclassified in
Right.
2018. So like nothing that's in the stuff that's in the hobby used to be inunguous, but like everyone knows like Ebonavia inunguous, but like none of the things that are in the hobby now are inunguous because like now that species has been keep going over here. I don't know why. That species has been like consolidated to like this one form that's in like the northwest of
Yep.
Madagascar, where like none of these are coming from. So like there's this really annoying key. You have to find whether their rostral scale makes direct contact with their nostril scale, and these things are tiny, and you get really mad and you swear at adorable little geckos because they don't stop moving, and you just want
That
to know
is
what
the
they
key.
are. That's the key.
Ugh.
When you do the key, step 1 is like here's this tiny species that's even more isolated in like the southwest of Madagascar, in this tiny little tropical area surrounded by a lot of dry. So like odds are they're not coming from there. It's this like tiny distribution. I keep doing this. I'm going over here. Like that's going to help. Um, they've got so it's not that. Step 2 is whether they're robusta or not. That's what they exclude with that step. And robusta are like what a lot of people saw as inunguous, like early on. These like big boulder colored ones. The kind of like more I don't know. They're like bigger and they're more robust. And then like some of the smaller species that have come in more recently, mostly I don't know if it's Betgarai or Botgarai. Um, they're kind of more like thin and yellowish, brownish. I mean, mostly brown, but they have like kind of a yellow tinge to them or whatever that's a little bit different. And they almost look like, I'm not supposed to pick favorites, but they almost just kind of, I think a lot of people I know somebody from this round that got them and was kind of disappointed because they had these big Robusta from years ago. And then they're like, oh, I'm getting more in. And then they got the smaller ones and like, they're not necessarily as showy to most people, maybe all people, but like, so anyways, so the second step in the key is to exclude that. And that's really obvious. They're super easy to ID. Third step though, there's 4 species left at that point. And the third step eliminates, or excludes Botgeri, which basically like 90% of these are. And then and kind of very small percent are mostly safari. There's 2 other species that aren't, but so you basically are trying to find out. So there's 3 species here. The 1 species is easy, and then the 2 species that are left, I am going to do this the whole time. The 2 species that are left, it's take a loop under very bright light to this tiny little squirmy gecko. I mean, like in a deli cup, usually, like, please go towards the side. I'm trying to loop you, and you're in the middle, and you're not moving, and now you're moving too much, and now you're not moving again. You're in the middle again. I need to see your nose. I just need to see your nose. And I don't know, but I figured if I can hoard these, a lot of people are getting in these mixed batch Abinavia imports. So if you order like 5 from whoever, like you don't necessarily know what you're going to get.
Right.
Or if you're going to get like compatible species. So if I get like 20 of them and Clint gets like 5, I can be like, hey, Clint, what do you got? And be like, he's got more than 5, I think. But if
you
he's
can
like,
start to group things appropriately.
To like fill in, like kind of socialize it, if you will. Like, I think, unfortunately, there's a lot of fragmenting that happens with imports because that's not always an option. I mean, sometimes it's
right.
A lot of people working separately. So it's like, I've got 2.1 and they've got 1.3 and they don't want less females, but I want one of their females. And it's like, if everything, so much of these import batches, I feel like if they were just better kind of, I don't know, distributed, or like if they were best spread around,
sure,
they'd have a lot better of a shot. Especially like with these different species, like I'll basically be able to just be like, hey, this is keyed out to this. If you know what you've got, here's whatever. Because I'm only probably going to keep like half of them,
right.
And I'm going to sell the rest of them for Clint for $500 each, super marked up. No, I'm planning to just do it for cost because I don't know. I would rather see them like be around.
Yeah.
Like, again, I've seen Abinavia just like come and go a few times. It's like, they're super cool.
And there's always, with import stuff, it's a double-edged sword, right? Like I'm really glad that some import things aren't crazy expensive because people like you and I have a few import things that I'm keeping in groups, and I wouldn't be able to do that if they were crazy expensive. But at the same time, because they're not very expensive, when you do go to a show or something, you will have people that buy like randoms or a small group that they probably aren't going to produce them, or that's might not even be their goal. They, and they buy a single one here or a single one there and these kind of things. And then when you get to the really obscure stuff like you're talking about, it's like, man, if little Susie just got the only female of those, we are so screwed. You know, and it's cool. I'm glad you want a pet gecko, and that's great, but we really need it for a purpose, you know.
Yeah, like I don't know if there's a way of, I haven't figured out a way to not sound like an elitist when relativizing that, but yeah, like it's like maybe if I just buy all these so that you can't,
But I
and
mean
then
that
I can private message some people that I know who are looking for this or that, you know,
right.
and then we can make sure that not 10% of them is, you know, that 10% of them isn't all that ends up going somewhere that they're not going to be. You know, there's quite a few coming in though. I don't think there's going to be a shortage of opportunity necessarily
Sure.
for some of them, but to be able to, like, yeah, just make sure that as high a percent go to capable hands as possible.
Yeah.
I think that's
It
just a hindrance on a lot of import species, is that they just
yeah,
get, they're at a pet store for $15 and Billy gets it, and Billy has the right to own an animal. I'm not
sure.
saying he doesn't,
But it is one of those things where, you know, that I think is also worth explaining to new people as well, is, you know, how you buy your animals and what you buy and things like that. It has a variety of different impacts, and that you need to kind of, you don't have to, you can do whatever you want, it's your money, but like, it would be really cool if you had it in your thought process of, you know, this, I could afford this, I could set this up, but I'm not going to do anything with it, I just want to look at it. And it's like, well, then maybe buy a captive bred or a captive born and bred one, because then you know that somebody out there is producing it. That's how you got it. You know, you're not removing it from the chance to do. It's kind of like all of us are hanging out at NARBC, and we sort of just decide to make a species survival plan the way a zoo would, but it has no structure and no direction at all. It's just like four dudes that know each other, and so you buy all the geckos, and then you just build your own. It's like, and that's the only way to really accomplish it, because I mean, you know, it's a free market. You're just at the reptile show, so if you want to buy a $15 gecko, then you do. And you're kind of fighting against that a little bit. But I think if we explained it to newer people of, you know, imports are difficult, you know, you got to treat and hydrate and so on and so forth. But also, if it's not produced at all and you don't want to produce it, then you really are just buying a one-off animal to watch until its life expectancy ends, and then it's just gone. And I don't know, that just seems wasteful, you know?
well, it's, I mean, yeah, I know. At the same time that I get excited that imports are happening, like I don't like to get too giddy about putting wild animals in cages. As
Yes.
anti-reptile industry as that might be, you know, and I realize I'm a hypocrite in that sense too, but like, I don't, so many of those so many imports come in and just dry up, and it's like,
Yeah.
and then next year they come in again because those ones dried up, but they
Yeah.
got bought, you know, and it's like, what are we doing? You know, I mean,
Yeah.
what's the plan here?
It is a little bit of that pipe dream, right? Like, I want enough to come in that someone does well and produces them, and then don't bring them in anymore. just produce them, and we can buy those, and you're good. You know, and then maybe like 5 years from now, when we need fresh bloodlines so we don't get weird genetic bottlenecks like all the things that we're mass producing, we'll bring a few more in. They'll go to these 6 people that need them, and then all the rest of us that just want one to look at will buy from them. And that, I mean, that hardly ever happens, but like, That's in my head. I'm like, oh, if we could just do it that way, you know?
Well, too, like just on the with imports, it's just interesting. Like I think a lot of people do, and I know I'm guilty of it. I've caught myself like where it's like, wow, I just saw a species for the first time that I didn't even know existed. And my first thought was, whoa, it would be cool if those were in the hobby. And then you catch yourself and go, whoa, wait a minute, buddy. Your like first reaction upon learning about a species of animal was, how can I get that thing in a cage? Like, as much as I understand that
Yeah, it's a
impulse, like
weird mentality, right?
let's try to like find an ethical intermediary point in that where we're not just trying to, I don't know. The more productive we can be with imports, the better. That's probably just the
Yeah,
long and short of it.
absolutely.
And Ebonavia are hilarious. I'm gonna bring Nick Esposito, last name drop, into the conversation in the sense that he very boldly and intelligently pointed out not that long ago even that he had theorized for some time that these Ebonavia we were getting in weren't compatible. And when you look back, it took me 7 years to produce them. And I only one time for a short while had a like with like pair, and they produced eggs. I got 2 clutches. I incubated them way too cold because I wasn't keeping them right, and nothing happened with them. Then the rest of the time, it was stuff that like pretty clearly what we thought was just like different localities or whatever. But then this like paper
Different
came
animals.
in, and they're just different species. And like I can't say it's like for sure true, but it checks out so far that like
Yeah.
I paired a pair up this spring, and within 3 weeks there were eggs on the ground. Like, and those were definitely both the Botgarai. So
Right.
it's like they're kind of a notoriously like difficult or at least sporadic species that like a lot of people just get like captive hatched offspring, and then they don't really breed a ton after that for most people. And I've got to give Nick credit as much as I like to be mean to Nick instead. Um, it it's a the theory kind of checks out because like it would make just perfect sense that like yeah we're I spent the better part of 7 years pairing up different species of Ebonavia, and for some reason nothing happened.
Right. But it now I've read the fashion parts never after that. Oh well, there you go. Nick had your opposite. Right out of the gate, good to go, and then nothing. So
I
but I
think
mean,
that's
it. I don't know. I mean, you did you did a large amount of work, and it maybe feels like you didn't have a lot to show for it because you didn't produce offspring, but have now come full circle to the point of like now these papers were produced and now you're talking about keying out these animals and have a group and have this group of people that you're pushing these lizards out to. And I mean, I would still say a lot came from that work. It just wasn't a whole lot of baby lizards.
yes, there is one, and it's tiny. It's less tiny than it was, but it's tiny. They I had a point. Um, I don't know if I had a point. They, well, I think for so when the paper first came out, my a buddy I skateboard with, who's a professor at UWSP Stevens Point, he had access to the paper, so he emailed me that, And I
Did
took
you
a
just
look
say
at
a
it.
buddy you skateboard with is a professor? You have a
Yeah,
buddy who's a skateboarding professor? That's fantastic.
Chris Deem. Yeah,
That's
he's a
epic.
good dude. I don't know how he skates as good. He's way better than me, and he's older than me, and it doesn't make sense. But um, so he emailed me this paper, and I was like, okay, there's a paper. It's got a key, new species. Hey everyone, like got like message some people that were like in the Ebonavia circle, if you will, and they were just like, yeah, that seems complicated. We're just gonna kind of plan on calling him Inunguous and continuing on like that. And I didn't really think anything of it, so I was like, yeah, that seems fine. I guess it seems like we would want to distinguish species, but if we think they're just from the same complex, and it's until you dissect the key a little bit, it's really hard to understand. So I think it basically just seemed impossible to figure out. Um, but that was under the bold assumption that they were going to be interbreedable,
Right.
which one person, Nicholas Esposito, came to the realization was possibly not the case. So a lot of imports, you see it with like Europlatus and some other genuses or genre. Um, that I find myself saying genuses a lot when I'm not among people that know what genre is referring to. But anyways, like Europlatus, there's been some like Europlatus coming in with the Madagascar imports recently, but there's like some funky ones. Like there's these Fimbriatus that look kind of like Giganteus, and like some people have been moving them as Giganteus, and like they've like updated it to call them Fimbriatus when people call them out, but they also don't align perfectly. And it's like, you don't, I think people forget that like a lot of these import waves bring in a batch of stuff that's collected here. I mean, it varies, but like you got this species, and like sometimes taxonomists just haven't gotten to the Ebonavia.
Yep.
So like you're getting in these different looking ones and wondering why they're not breeding good. And it's like, oh yeah, that's because the last time they came in, there were just like hundreds of this one kind coming in, and you don't have that anymore. Those aren't coming in anymore. So like you're only going to have luck with those. And
For sure.
people like, oh, this species is coming in for the first time in years, and like you want to assume like, oh yeah, it's this species, and therefore they will be able to interbreed. And a lot of times people, including myself, have trouble with like, these are a little bit different and they're not really breeding. Like I'm going to tend to blame myself.
Right.
but I'm a little suspicious that in the paper, the Ebonavia, it got split into 6 species, but the authors cited like, yeah, if we had resources and time, it's probably like 16. I don't remember what their reasoning was, but it's like, yeah. So we don't even know like that the 6 that you made a key for are it. Like you might have gotten this type locality from here, and like you relied on that, and some of their uh, like n values were pretty low for that too, where it's like, are you sure? Are you sure you can make a key that's reliable?
Well, and then I think that's something that people who don't have a lot of experience with um, scientific literature, like those are things you have to pay attention to. Even when like green tree pythons just had some different changes for species and subspecies and things, and the authors said, we think that some of these subspecies may be worthy of species consideration, and there may be this, that, and the other thing, but with the data we were able to get in our time frame, this is what we're comfortable saying. And if I remember correctly, it was something, like they had a grant for a certain period of time, and people don't realize that like there's a structure to that. Like you could only get so much money to go look at Ebonavia for 2 years or whatever, a master's program. And then that professor and his students have to produce for this grant that they got to go look at these lizards. And so they produce with the evidence that they have, and they're like, okay, all this jives, this makes sense to us.
And then Aaron Bauer comes in and goes, we're not doing that. We're doing this.
But and it's one of those like,
sorry, Aaron Bauer.
But we have the evidence for these 6, but we think if we got another grant, or we could continue our time, or if we had 4 years instead of 2 years, or so on and so forth, we see evidence for maybe 16 or for 10 or for whatever. And we get so stuck with like, yeah, 6, cool, divide everything out and we're done. And it's like, well, no, wait, the person studying them said we're not done. they just ran out of time, or they ran out of money, or what have you. And also, in the grand scheme of the world, probably not a lot of people give them time and money to study tiny lizards. So,
And they're like, yeah, this is a really unproductive process. Like, these things are tiny and they hide well. Like, we're not finding like 20 a minute. Like, but yeah, it's and even the ones that I have, it's hard to tell with like a group of 20, because it's 3 different species. The most I have is like a dozen of the Betgeri, and it's like there's kind of some variety within them, but it's tough to confidently say that it should be split. Like, I should split this group, kind of preemptively split this group into 6 and 6, because these kind of look different. Because like, I don't know, you do so much guesswork in a way based on just whether or not you think a thing might be a thing in the wild, but like you only have the scope
right,
that you're working with. Like, I don't know, is 6 and 6 enough to say that those are 2 distinct types, or should they be treated the same? Will 3 years from now, will they revise the genus to split those 2 up, and then I'll wish I had done that? Or
yeah, I mean, you just kind of have to work with the information available to you, right? I mean, that's I don't know, I actually think that's kind of cool. Like, my degree's in biology, and I have a background in literature and things like that, and like it's not like super cool cancer research or something like that, but like that really is cutting edge science when it comes to taxonomy and things like that. Like, that you're guys in the hobby working with these geckos, and then one paper that was published with a key is like the forefront of Ebonavia research. And now you're just trying to figure it out, and with limited information and a bunch of lizards that don't want to be touched.
The one plus side, at least, is that the more common 2 of the species are sympatric as far as their distribution overlaps. And then I'm theorizing that the third species spreads out a little bit more over the north, but I think that it's from it aligns with the distribution of another species just under it, but it doesn't, according to their population map that they show, it doesn't overlap. But I got boxes that have both, which would tell me that there's a good chance that it was in that gray area that some of those were being collected, which at least tells me that the 3 species should be pretty similar care and temp wise, because that third species kind of has a range. It's Ebonavia safari, that is like kind of warm rainforest tropical. But then as it goes towards like the northwest of Madagascar, it starts to get drier and hotter. So like there would be a little bit of variation, but at least we know that they're probably, we think we know that they're probably coming from similar habitat. So you're not looking at, I've 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 looked at the climate maps and stuff, but it doesn't really like here's how you treat this one. It's just kind of like,
Right.
yeah, they're basically kind of, for all I can tell, coming from about the same environment.
Okay. All right, man. Well, we're cruising to like an hour and 20. So to wrap up this episode, where can folks find you to talk about more obscure brown lizards and the future of Ebonavia taxonomy?
Well, there's an Ebonavia group on Facebook that I started to kind of collectivize the several different conversations that were going on a little bit, try to centralize things. Starting Facebook groups does a fair amount for like different genre. It's very easy and free.
For sure.
But, I don't know. I hide in the shadows. I'm on New Scale Herpetoculture if you want to message lizard or gecko stuff. I can be a little bit shy about the personal page, but
All good.
I am conversive on the New Scale Herp page
Cool.
and
So
Instagram.
when we wrap up, message me the Ebonavia group, and then when I post this episode to the Facebook page, I will tag that so that folks can find out where that is at. Cool.
That'd be awesome. There's like
Awesome.
8 people in it right now, so which I mean is fine because they're all 8 people that are actually like
that
focused
are
on it.
for sure into it. Right. Okay, man. Well, I will tag that when I post the episode, and I really appreciate you coming on. It was awesome, dude.
Thank you. It's good to actually talk to you.
Yeah,
In
for sure.
Ish.
Yeah, well, internet in person. So.
Close enough. We'll see you
All
at
right, man.
Tinley sometime. I think you're kind of in range of me. I mean, not like
Yeah.
you're one state away, so.
Yeah, closer than most folks that get scattered through the Facebook of reptiles. So, for sure.
Cool.
All right.
Well,
thank you.
Thanks for having me.
See ya.
See you.
All right. That was episode 16. That was fantastic. I'm so glad he came on to talk to us. And make sure you check the Facebook post, and I will tag the Ebonavia group so that folks can check that out. I think that's cool, man. That I wasn't kidding. Like, that's the forefront of taxonomy, is trying to figure out these species. Then you got a paper with a key, and now you have folks that it's really important to them, and they're putting in the work. That's awesome. So I will see you guys in another 2 weeks. Later.